If you find yourself wanting to have a really collected style, not necessarily antiques only, but also don't really want to lean too modern or too contemporary, I have a little framework that I think might work for you. It helped me during my bathroom reno, and I've also been thinking about it a lot when decorating the rest of my house. You know that old phrase that you use during weddings? Well, my interior design spin on that is something old, something borrowed, something new. Something old, you're going to be thinking of those tried and true, have been around since the beginning of time. Mostly it's going to end up being natural materials: wood, plaster, stone, wool, linen materials. The second category, something borrowed, this is where you're thinking of borrowing from a different era that's not your own. This is where your antiques would fall, your vintage pieces, or even certain patinas. Even design aspects like Spanish or Moroccan shapes, African textile patterns. That's what we're thinking for the borrowed category. And for something new, this can be really subjective. It really depends what you interpret as new and modern. For example, if you grew up and your grandma's house was lots of dark, moody colors, or maybe lots of scroll work, to you, contemporary might feel like a lot of negative space, white walls, really clean lines, or very geometric shapes. Figure out what it is for you, and then you're going to start to place decisions as you make them into one of the categories. End goal being that everything feels really balanced. So I'm going to use my shower as an example because it's really interesting that it actually ended up only being 3 elements in the shower. And the first one I started with was the glass block windows. I talked about those in another episode. I decided to interpret those in a more postmodern 70s, 80s. I'm putting those into the borrowed category. The second design decision is what to do with the walls of the shower. And we chose to do micro cement in a way that pretty much replicates plaster. My last decision that I had to make was what kind of hardware to get. What I've always dreamed of having, which was a unlacquered brass with a beautiful old patina. I realized that was going to look very heavily into the antique when my goal was to try to have a more balanced look. So that actually led me to choosing something that was, in my interpretation, a more modern looking fixture, which ended up being something that didn't have patina, so more of a metallic, shiny finish. And then it also meant silver hardware for me. I just interpret gold as more of an antique metal and silver as more of a modern metal. I ended up having one in each category, which I think really lended to having an overall very balanced shower in the end. But I'm experimenting with this framework in even all of my other rooms because I think subconsciously I've been doing this ever since I started collecting pieces or decorating my apartments. Another thing we have to talk about is what actually does timeless mean, because I think it actually has a lot to do with this. So maybe we'll talk about that in the next episode.